Think it's time we rise up, people. It's time's up, people. You can talk all you want, but it won't change a thing. I wanna know what you do.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Up and Up. Today we have a returning guest. This is Andre Walton. We know him from his activism up in Wisconsin with our revolution and various organizations. And now Andre is running for office. Andre, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jodi. I'm really excited. Yeah, it's been a little while since we've been on, but what comes around goes around, and we're back again. So I'm excited to be back on.
So I like to say it's a small activist family out there. You know what I mean? You always stay in touch. Cool. So tell us a little bit about what is the office you're running for and what kind of brought you to this point, making the transition from activist to elected official?
Yeah. So it's kind of like a slow, natural progression. So the last time we talked, I was living in Milwaukee. So since then, I've been living in Sheboygan. And from there, I've been really involved. I got appointed to the library board and also the Housing and Rehabilitation Committee here in the city. So from there, I met a lot of people and made a lot of connections. And I never really thought about really running for office because I've always been kind of the outside guy. So I was just like, yeah, I do my thing out here. It's less stressful. But then, some of the people who I worked with on the library board were like, hey, you should really think about running for office. You're really good. You're smart. And we need more young energy on the city council. And I'm like, there's no chance. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. But then, they kind of kept, hashing at me and kind of wore me down. And then I was like, fine, I'll think about it. And then the opportunity arose, as we were still kind of having that conversation, that the guy who we were thinking about running against, he resigned from the city council. So there was a vacancy. So we were like, well, this is kind of a good moment to take advantage of. So, I put my letter of intent in for the city council. And there was 4 other candidates who ran. So I beat them all out. And it was pretty easy victory. So I think the vote ended up being 7-1. So it wasn't really close. And there was actually one guy who said he would vote for me, but he was on vacation, so he couldn't vote physically. So it would have been 8-1.
Just to clarify, though, really quick, this vote is not of the citizens. This is the vote of the council itself. So just a little bit about that process, right?
Yeah. So the way vacancies work in Sheboygan for city council is when there's a vacancy, the council appoints and votes for to fill the vacancy, and then you just fill out the rest of the term of the person you replaced until your election. So that's why I'm running for re-election technically. It was a fast moving process when the vacancy happened because I think once they announced it was like 2 weeks, so we had to really move fast to make sure that we can kind of lobby for ourselves. But yeah, once we did that, it was pretty much a sealed deal.
Yeah, and like you said, being on these boards and things, you were able to get to know people who were on the council already. So you were already a familiar face from doing those kind of things and whatnot. And wow, that's awesome. And of course, that puts you in a really good position for, like you said, it's a re-election as opposed to coming in, brand spanking new. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. So tell me a little bit about, real quick, your experience on working on the boards, because that's kind of another thing. And I think a good way to get, dip your toe in the water and say, is this something I want to do? And then also kind of familiarize yourself with other people. So tell me about what were the boards that you joined and how did that work? Were you appointed to those as well?
Yeah, so I was, there was, funny enough, there was also a vacancy for the library board. So I'm filling the vacancy actually actively right now for the library board. And then once it comes up, we'll see if I continue to do it. But that came up and I was saying, and I was already looking to get involved, but I had never served on the board, but they were looking to, fill that vacancy and looking for somebody young. And I was like, hey, I'm available. I have a lot of time on my hand. And that's kind of how that happened. So I learned very fast how boards work. So It's very similar how their structure works on how the city council works. So, we have our agendas, we have our discussions, we have our department head basically. And that's where we get our information to help us make our sound decisions. We have a budget. The library board is very different than the other departments because they have their own separate budget. They determine their own budget and then they send it to the city council. So we get to work like firsthand on how to deal with and work with budgets. So that was a very good experience for me because it kind of set me up to be ready for the budget dealings for the city council. So my first meeting on the city council, we had a 3-hour budget meeting. So it was like I was already technically ready. So that put me in the right position. And then the other committee that I'm on is the Housing and Rehabilitation Committee. And I really like this committee because it basically gives really low interest loans, city backed loans to homeowners, low income homeowners that may not be able to be applicable for housing loans for to rehabilitate their houses. So like they might not be able to get a bank loan, so they come to the city and ask for help. So it's like a really nice thing that we do for homeowners that maybe low income or maybe they're elderly and don't necessarily have the right credit to get like a U.S. bank loan. So that experience was really nice for me because it helped me see the other side of departments. So this one comes from the housing department, which was really nice. Gave me really nice experience on what goes on in the city, the home ownership issue here in Sheboygan. So there's a lot of homeowners here in Sheboygan, but a lot of them are very low income. I think the average income in Sheboygan is about $48,000. So like, even though there's homeowners, they're not like, making a whole bunch of money. So they're kind of right there living paycheck to paycheck. So it's nice that we can give them support, especially during a pandemic when, a lot of homeowners got hit here. So that experience really set me up nice for the city council.
Yeah, I have to say, especially, as people know, I ran in Keene for city council. And just a huge, huge issue that I think everywhere is dealing with right now is housing. And so to come up with kind of a variety of ways where, homeowners can stay in their homes and that people can actually afford, to stay where they are is absolutely huge. And especially we see around the country, a lot of, housing being bought up, and then rented to people at prices that they can't afford. So if we can keep homeowners owning their own homes, that's amazing. I'd love to talk to you a little bit more about that on another day. So what would you say as far as, so I know that you've been involved, just to recap, right, on the library committee and on the housing and rehabilitation committee, and have been appointed to the city council in a city. Is it a ward seat or an at-large seat?
No, it's so it's a little different how Sheboygan works. It's broken up by districts, so not wards or by city. So we have 10 districts, and I'm in the 10th district of Sheboygan. So that's kind of nice because we don't have to run citywide. Because if that was the case, I probably wouldn't get reelected because we got some pissed off people that were kind of pissed that I got the appointment, but they don't even live in my district. So it's been an interesting thing, but nice thing is I'm only serving for the 10th district. So yeah.
Awesome. That's great. And that, of course that is my, as far as, the city council, and I'm not sure how big is Sheboygan, but how many people do you think?
Yeah, it's about between, I think 48 to 49,000 people, give or take. So yeah, it's relatively small city compared to a lot of cities throughout the United States, I guess.
Well, it breaks it down to, even in a city that size, there are different interests that need to be represented, right? And so different things in different districts and whatnot. So it's nice that, you can really focus in on, I would just logically from 4,500 people in each district, thereabouts, I'm sure. And so, that way you can really hone in on what the people of your district are really looking for and need as far as representation in the city council is concerned. So holler. That's awesome. I'm so excited. So, okay, when you're running for it, keeping that in mind, right? That, of course you are, part of the whole of representing the whole city, but also representing explicitly the people in your district as well. What are kind of the main things that you talk about in your race? Like, what are your top line, people's top line concerns and how you address it?
Yeah. My biggest one, like literally my biggest one, since I was kind of talking about housing, is affordable housing. So we've been having a lot of downtown development, apartments built, and they call it affordable housing, but the rent is like, I don't know, like $1,300 per month. And I'm just like, who is that affordable to? And it doesn't even make sense. And so I'm just like, how can we talk about affordable housing if we're not actually getting information from the people who are most affected by this and people who can't necessarily afford it? So, for me, I think the interesting position that I get to be in is that I come from a background of poor and low income family. And I know, how, living paycheck to paycheck is and how rent works. And that, sometimes what's maybe considered affordable to those in higher statuses isn't the same for those in lower statuses. So I get to express that for the people of my district. Because right now we're having a real big struggle with growing as a city. And the main reason is because a lack of income in housing and a lack of income in growth. Because there's businesses leaving right now. So, and that's directly correlated to how many people are able to move to Sheboygan because there's not enough apartments right now. So if we can have more apartments built that are affordable to live in, then we'll obviously bring more business here as well. Because one of the big issues right now that some of the business that I've seen start up is that they can't necessarily hire staff. And that's because we don't necessarily have the population to make the staff. It's a staff shortage, but it's not for the reasons of other cities. It's not because we're not paying a living wage, because most of the jobs that are hiring at $15 an hour here. It's just a matter of that we can't get enough young people and working people to move to the city, and that's directly correlated to the housing issue. So that's like my biggest issue right now. Also advocating for more businesses to come to my district. So my district is kind of at the tail end of the city, and I call it the forgotten district. And the reason why I call it that is because there's not a lot of businesses. There's not a lot of entertainment that you can go to in my district. So there's no bars. So if you want to go to a bar, you got to drive all the way downtown, which is basically all halfway across the city. So I think, if we advocate for more entertainment, more young people will move to the district, which would be nice. That would help, businesses thrive and more young people move to the district, which I think is necessary. Another big one for me is just kind of fighting to protect our lakeshore. So yeah, if you've never been to Sheboygan, we have a beautiful lakeshore, and it's right, on my district and pretty much across all the districts. But we have an issue with the lakeshore eroding, and that's due to pollution, climate change, and things like that. And if we don't protect our lakeshore, then we don't really have a place for families to go and hang out during the summers and spring, to go swimming, just to enjoy life. And we have a lot of activity on our lakeshore. People go to barbecues, people go and have fun. And it's a big thing here in Sheboygan. So protecting the lakeshore is a big thing for me. So making sure that it's environmentally friendly, the policies that we introduce, to make sure our wastewater is environmentally friendly to our lakeshore, and that we're addressing climate change. So those are my biggest three right there. But obviously there's a whole bunch of things that I'm advocating for. Obviously, if you're not from Wisconsin, I'll explain this too. One of the biggest issues that we have is that we can't really determine our tax rate, or we can't increase the tax rate when it comes to various different taxes. It's very complicated. I don't want to explain it here. But the reason why that is because there are state laws that prohibit local governments from taxing their citizens. And the reason why they do that is for political reasons, not necessarily because it's the right thing to do. And what that means is that local governments have a hard time raising revenue. So we're kind of restrained in our city budget. So one of the biggest issues is that we cannot raise our minimum wage here in the city because we're restrained by the state. We also cannot, we also have a lack of state shared revenue, which means that the revenue that we send to them, they're supposed to send a certain amount back. And there's a lack of that. So which means it's constraining our budget. So we can't do certain projects that we need to do. We can't, fix certain roads that we need to fix. I got a road right in the back of my house that is just completely terrible. And it's just been like that for years, but we can't fix it because we don't have the money. So like advocating for changes in local government laws is going to be big for me as well. So there's a lot of issues that we need to tackle, and it has a lot to do directly correlated to state government, but it's hard to tackle it because here in Wisconsin, we have supreme gerrymandering, which means that the Republican Party can kind of do what they want without repercussion or without pushback. So it's a tough issue to deal with. And yeah, those are my big issues. I know that was a long answer, but it's definitely important to talk about these issues.
No, and you know what? It's very interesting because I know that, it changes state to state and things like that. But a lot of what you said resonates so well with me about what's happening in New Hampshire. With, the same thing is a big thing recently is this rooms and meals tax that, we send off all this money to the state and then, it doesn't come back and you're just, how can you just not send this money back? This is millions of dollars, that, right. Is coming out of our pocket because the state doesn't come back. But it's very, go ahead.
And I would just elaborate a little bit on that. When states do that, it ends up becoming a regressive tax on the back end because then they start finding new ways to come up with money, like a wheel tax or something like that, or a gas tax. And that usually hits the poorest amongst us the worst. So it really backfires on, the most vulnerable. And that's why I really hate it. But, that's why it's nice that I have this position now. I can really advocate for those things.
Yeah. It's interesting, I think, especially with those kind of things where, or let me just put it this way, especially I think for you and I who come from the same kind of activist background of, dealing with things on a state and on a federal level, right? And then translating that into, okay, well, what can I do on the local level? What are the things that I can do? Some of these things heavily interact with the state level, right? So I guess what I'm asking you is, when you're looking at that type of situation where it kind of mixes between the two, right? Where it interacts with the state and on different levels and things like that. What do you think is the best way to kind of approach that from someone who is working on the local level?
Yeah, it's a lot tougher to answer that when we got gerrymandering. But, one of the nice things is that at least we have a good relationship with our county level officials. So that kind of helps. But there is a little bit of, politics played in that as well. But I think it really hinders on, going back to activism and advocacy, because if we can go to our citizens and citizens around the county and let them know how these state laws are oppressing the cities and local governments and localities, then they can put pressure on their assembly reps and their Senate reps and say, hey, this is hurting us. Why don't you do something about it? And if you don't do something about it, we'll vote for somebody who will do something about it. And we do understand that it's gerrymandering, but maybe we can get a Republican primary to run on this issue. So there are ways that we can put pressure, and it goes directly back to activism and advocacy. Even if it's a Republican district, we can let them know, like, hey, you might not agree with me on X, Y, and Z, but this is still directly hurting you. So that's in my opinion, the best way to approach it. The only issue is it's so hard to get the word out about that because a lot of people don't understand how, shared revenue works, how local government taxes work. All they see at the end of the day is how much is taxed on their check at the end of the day. And that's all they care about. But they don't know where their money is going. They have no idea, how it's being used and where it goes, how it affects local governments. So that's the hardest part, is educating people how it affects them in a timely manner. Because if I go and knock on doors, most people only have a few minutes to actually want to hear what I have to say. They don't have time to go to 10-minute talk at the door, or maybe they don't even have time to go to a town hall to hear about these things. But the ones who do, obviously they're very in the minority. So it's a tough issue to tackle, but I think it harps on a lot of activism, also working with a lot of the elected officials to put pressure on the state officials to change these laws, because it's definitely hurting us really bad.
Yeah. So let me just say really quick, because I think in the beginning, I'm pretty sure how I put it was talking about your transition from activist to elected official. But it's not really a transition. It's just really kind of still wearing that hat, but, in a different way. And so how do you see activists and, I think you really kind of gave a pretty good example, right, of how activists and elected officials work together. And so, it's not just one or the other. It's all of the things, and then these things supporting each other and working together on those things. So do you still have, well, let me just put it this way. Do you have a strong volunteer base, considering that, considering that you have been an activist, it would be one of those people who is knocking on doors, and I'm sure will be for yourself. But do you have a lot of people stepping up to return the favor, kind of?
Yeah. So the nice thing is, since we last talked, I actually became executive director of our Wisconsin Revolution. So that comes with some nice benefits, obviously, with name recognition and people who are willing to come and help out the campaign and donate to the campaign. So yeah, the nice thing is that I'm in a strong position as far as name recognition on both ends, from elected position and also an executive director position of a statewide organization. But yeah, we have a lot of help. So like the nice thing is that we have probably the strongest campaign that's going to be running here on the local, and that's between all the other districts as well. I think we have the nicest volunteer base, and we also have the nicest donation base. So, anybody who wants to challenge me, I'm like, bring it on. Like, you're not going to outwork us. You're not going to, I have issues with money in politics, but the nice thing about the money we're bringing in, it's all grassroots. We have not gone to any big donors. Everybody who's donated are literally working class people, people who make less than $50,000 a year. My average donation right now is, I think, $40. So we're doing really good on both ends. But the nice thing, the interesting thing, I'm not going to say nice thing, but the interesting thing is being the executive director of our Wisconsin Revolution. I still have my activist hat on, and that comes with a little bit of blowback from the city. So I was telling you a little bit about this earlier, that not everybody was happy that I've gotten the appointment to the seat. And the reason why that is because we have criticisms of government and police and things like that. So, some people don't like that. They think, I want to defund the police here in Sheboygan. And, it's funny that they don't really take the nuance of the statements that we've made with OWR, because even if you look at some of our statements, we even explicitly say this is not a symptom or an issue of individual police departments, but a symptom of a system that allows police to continue, abuse their power. And it's more of a criticism of a system. So I use the example of, like, if I criticize a school system, that doesn't mean every school in that system is bad, but that does still mean the system needs to be changed. So, we got some actors out here who don't necessarily like I got the appointment. And obviously I'm on an organization that is very politically active. So, not everybody agrees with it, but, I'm willing to have that discussion and have some back and forth with them. But, the interesting thing is, I'm not ever going to shy away from my activist background. I'm never going to shy away from what I advocate for, whether it's money in politics, whether it's police reform, whether it's environmental change or economic justice. I'm going to continue to do that. And one thing that people do not understand about me is I'm never and will never be a career politician. I'm activist first, politician second. And the reason why I think that is going to be always true for me is because I'm going to always speak for the people. And that does not always necessarily correlate to a politician. Right. Politicians usually speak for their own careers and their own self-gain. And that's just not me. And whenever I feel like that may become where the where I have to go, then I'm going to step down from the seat, because that's not where I want to be, and that's not where I want to see myself. So yeah, that's why the people who are a little bit mad about my appointment, I say, hey, challenge me. If you don't like what I do, vote me out. That's fine. This is what democracy is about. But at the end of the day, I'm going to continue to do what I do to advocate for a better world for the people. And that's just how it is.
I love it. Let me just, I'm kind of curious, especially because you brought up this particular example of police reform, and believe me, you get it all the time, anytime where you're having conversations about, kind of these, what feels like intentional misunderstandings, like it says it right here. We explain it right here, but you still just don't want to, you just want to run with your own narrative. But anyway, but what I found, at least, well, let me just give you an example. So one of the first people I talked to when I decided I was running was a businessman here in town, small businessman, and who I was working with as a vendor. And so he was one of the first people who knew, because I was, talking to him. And we got into this conversation, and you could tell right off the bat, he's very conservative minded, things like that. I get it. And I can recognize that my family's very conservative, so yep, I get the language. But anyway, having that, one of the first things that he said was brought up someone who was a counselor and said, oh, he wants to legalize all drugs. Think about this guy. He wants to legalize heroin and blah, blah, blah. And Andre, you probably know one of my big things is, ending the drug war, and that's because I've lost someone to substance use disorder. I understand what the impact of that is, not only on that person, but, the fallout over the years, and of course that it's failed. Well, part of that is legalizing and regulating. I do believe in legalizing and regulating all drugs. And it's not because I think the drugs are good. It's because I think that that's a better way to deal with it and to actually save lives. But to have that conversation with someone, there's, right off the bat, when he brought this up, it was very much like, he wants to legalize heroin, and this kind of shock factor, lack of nuance and things like that. And so what I found in that conversation, even in that first conversation when I didn't know him at all, over the course of 10 minutes, we were able to actually have that conversation and bring it back to the standpoint from someone who has lost someone to the war on drugs, and how this is played out and how things could be different. And, I won't rehash the whole conversation, but by the time we got to the end of that conversation, I'm pretty sure we circled back to what was a decent kind of common ground where we were able to make that connection. Now, with politicians, it's a lot harder because they're going to stick with their, very simplistic things and things like that. But I have found, at least I found in my experience, that it was able to have that conversation and get past that kind of shock factor. If I was talking to, an average person, you know what I mean? Just somebody who I ran into or something like that, rather than someone who's already invested in the partisan politics and things like that. And I'm curious, in your experience, have you found the same thing, or if you've, if you any impressions about that, being able to break through the partisanship?
Yeah, 100%. So I think, what you did there is, what I try to do is you humanize your story and why you care about these things. A lot of times when we're having these conversations, we don't humanize it. We just talk about it as a policy point that we care about and, put some statistics in there, but nobody cares about that. But once you humanize it and shows how it has affected you, affected people close to you, then people kind of take a step back and like, oh, this person is a human being, and let me hear out their standpoint. We might disagree at the end of the day, but they have a reason why they've come to this point. And, once you have that conversation, people respect you, even if they don't agree with you, that I respect your point. We're not going to agree. But I respect your stance now, and I understand why you came to that conclusion. And I think another thing that's really nice about those type of conversations is you can find, like you said, common ground. And when you kind of get deep into these conversations, you start to learn more about what you have in common with these people. And I think as a society, especially the United States partisan society, is we focus more on our disagreements rather than our agreements, even if our agreements are way out more than our disagreements. And I'll give you a quick example of this. I was at the Sheboygan County Fair when I was having a conversation with this guy. He was a clear Trumper. He came up to me and he was like, why is Biden destroying the country? And I was like, you know what? I really don't know, but let's have a talk about money and politics, and then maybe we can figure it out. And then he was just kind of blown away because, like, next thing you know, like, we were agreeing on everything we were talking about. And he was just like, I was just ready to come and argue with you, you know? It's just like, but he didn't get that experience because I focused more on like what we have in common and what we can traditionally agree on. Because at the end of the day, most people have a despise money in politics. People hate the wars. People want to see a $15 minimum wage, and people want to see corruption out of politics. And I focused on those issues. And by the time we were done conversating, he was just like, wow, I had no idea this conversation was going to go this way. He shook my hand and said, you never change who you are. And I think, you know, focusing on the commonalities is where we have our best gains. And people think, you know, just because these small disagreements that you can't work with those people, you can't talk with those people. But at the end of the day, I'm a true believer in this. We all want the same thing. We all want a roof over our house. We all want to have enough a beneficial economic status to supply for our family. And we all just want to, you know, live a happy life. And I think those are the three common things that we can all focus on when it comes to policy. And I think, you know, you've clearly done this as well in your time running. And I think, you know, if we focus on those things, we can always get over the partisanship and not focus on like the culture war on Dr. Seuss or critical race theory. You know, once you focus on that, you're digging your own grave, and it's a waste of time. But, you know, that's what I focus on. And I've been having some really good conversations in the district just by focusing on those type of issues.
I love it. I love it. And I'm sure you're going to do so well, Andre, because I just feel like it's right up your alley. And I mean, well, you know, I mean, I'm pretty sure you're going to do well with the door knocking because I could talk to you all day.
Yeah. The nice thing about running in a small district is you only need 20 signatures to get on the ballot, which is very low. But signature gathering started yesterday, and I only canvassed maybe for 2 hours yesterday, and I got 23 signatures. So I'm already past the required amount, but yeah, we're going to keep going in for signature because we're aiming to get 400. Because if we get 400, we're pretty much in a solid state to win the election. But yeah, it's I'm already past that limit. But you know, if it only took me 2 hours to get 23 signatures, imagine when I got a full day on the weekends. I'm going to get a lot, so I'm looking forward to this weekend.
Now, tell me, when is this election?
Yeah, so if we have a primary, there's a primary election in February. If there's no primary, then the election will go straight to April. And you know, if we're opposed or not, then that would determine, you know, how we'll approach it. But either way, we're ready for it, and we're going to work our butts off. Because like I said, nobody's going to outwork our campaign. They have no idea what they're going to get into if they challenge me.
I mean, seriously. So I'm just, you know, doing the math. So 4 months until what would be the primary, and then 6 months until you're already, yeah. I'm okay. Yeah. Nope. Knock on wood. I'm not going to get confident with you, even though I know you're going to win. No, I'm just kidding. Very exciting. Very exciting. And so, feel free to come back and check in with us. I know I'm going to be following the campaign. And of course, you know, like Andre said, just to turn my attention to the audience here. Like Andre said, you know, he's got a average of $40 donation. He's got all grassroots donations, you know, people chipping in. So if you can, is there a link that you can give us that people might be able to chip in a few bucks here and there?
Yeah, I'm gonna give everyone my Facebook page, because if I tell you the donation link, you're just gonna forget it. So just because it's kind of weirdly laid out. But if you go to our Facebook page, Walton for Sheboygan 10, not the number 4, the word 10, on Facebook, then you can find our donation link and you can kind of find all the updates and what we're working on. So yeah, if you want to check us out, it's all Walton for Sheboygan on our social medias, for Sheboygan 10 on the social medias, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. You can find us, and that's also the email. So if you just feel like emailing us, reaching out, it's also waltonforsheboygan10@gmail.com. So yeah, you know, I'm really looking forward to, you know, continue this campaign. This is a new experience for me. Before, I've been on the campaigning side as a staffer. This is my first time as a candidate. So it's been an interesting experience so far, and just going to enjoy the journey.
Exciting. All right. Follow Andre, chip in some money if you can. And if you live around Sheboygan, share this out. Get Andre's name out there.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. And let's keep in touch. Absolutely.
Sure.
All right. Bye, y'all.